Have you ever felt the part of you that always bows, always pleases, always obeys, quietly gnawing at your own worth? That part of you that wags its tail for approval, that bends for scraps of affection, that waits for permission to be? There is a dog inside us all, loyal, eager, hungry for recognition. But loyalty without wisdom becomes slavery, and hunger without boundaries becomes self-destruction. The dog in us is the conditioned self, trained by society, by fear, by the need to be liked. It waits to be fed, waits to be noticed, waits to be loved. And in that waiting, it forgets it was born with teeth. Machiavelli once warned us, the world does not reward the tame, it respects the cunning, the watchful, the relentless wolf. The wolf does not beg, it claims. The wolf does not seek pity, it earns respect. And when you strip away the obedience, when you silence the endless need to please, what remains is not cruelty, it is clarity. A spirit unafraid of its own power. So the question is, how long will you live as a dog when a wolf waits within you? We are raised in a world that rewards compliance more than courage, where the child who sits still is called good, while the one who questions is labeled trouble. This conditioning runs so deep that by the time we reach adulthood, we believe obedience is the only currency for belonging. We bend, we bow, we bite our tongues, and we learn to wear masks so convincing that we forget what our real face looks like. The dog within us grows stronger with every yes we give against our will, with every compromise we make to keep the peace, with every time we sacrifice dignity for approval. And yet, beneath the surface, something aches, a restless whisper telling us that survival without authenticity is just another form of death. But because we fear rejection more than emptiness, we let the dog lead. We learn to beg for scraps of validation, forgetting that somewhere inside a wolf watches, waiting to be remembered. The tragedy is that society applauds this dog. The obedient one is praised, the agreeable one is celebrated, the one who follows rules even when they destroy him is called moral. We are handed stories of saints who gave until they had nothing left, heroes who were admired for their endless sacrifice, and we are told to walk the same path. But what is never spoken is the cost. The obedient dog may win affection, but he loses himself. He may be invited into homes, but never into respect. He may be tolerated, but never feared, never revered, never truly free. This is the conflict Machiavelli saw with ruthless clarity. The world pretends to honor goodness, but in practice, it bows only to power. This contradiction lives within every human heart, and it tears at us silently. On one side, there is the comfort of being liked, accepted, embraced by others. On the other, there is the burning hunger to stand tall, to command respect, to live without chains. Most choose comfort. They remain dogs because the leash feels safer than the wild. They confuse safety with happiness, forgetting that cages can be gilded and still remain cages. They silence their anger, bury their desires, and tell themselves that peace is found in surrender. But that peace is fragile, temporary, always at the mercy of someone else's approval. Deep down they know. The day the hand that feeds decides to withdraw, the dog is left starving, powerless, forgotten. The wolf is different. The wolf does not wait for permission, nor does it beg for favor. The wolf endures hunger, walks alone, faces the cold, but never bows. And yet, here lies the hardest truth. To embrace the wolf means facing a life with no guarantees. The dog is loved conditionally, while the wolf is often feared and misunderstood. That is why the conflict feels unbearable. Do we sacrifice authenticity to feel safe? Or do we sacrifice comfort to feel alive? Most of us try to play both roles, switching masks depending on who we are with. And in doing so, we lose both the loyalty of the dog and the strength of the wolf. We live fragmented, hollow, and endlessly torn. It is not cruelty that makes the wolf powerful. It is clarity. The wolf understands that respect cannot be begged for. It must be commanded. The wolf knows that the world does not protect the naive, it devours them. This is not cynicism, it is reality. The dog survives by dependency, the wolf survives by awareness. To awaken the wolf inside means stripping away illusions that obedience alone guarantees safety. It is realizing that love without respect is pity, and pity is poison. And when you finally see this truth, the chains around your spirit begin to crack, though the breaking of them will cost you every comfort you thought you needed. The conflict grows sharper the moment you decide to live with self-respect. People who once adored your compliance will accuse you of being selfish, cold, or difficult. The dog was predictable, but the wolf makes them uneasy. They will test you, guilt you, try to pull you back into obedience because your independence exposes their own chains. And here you must choose. Do you shrink back into the dog to preserve harmony, or do you endure their disapproval to protect your soul? This is the crucible where transformation begins, where the softness of obedience burns away, leaving behind something untamed, unbending, alive. But the path is not without pain. To kill the dog in you is to bury years of conditioning, to unlearn the habits that won you affection but stole your identity. It is to let go of the applause, the handouts, the easy approval, and to walk into the wilderness of solitude. Yet, in this wilderness, something astonishing happens. You begin to hear yourself again. The conflict, once suffocating, starts to sharpen you. Every scar becomes a teacher. Every rejection, a form of purification. And though the dog howls for comfort, the wolf within learns to hunt, to stand, to endure. It is here that you begin to understand what Machiavelli meant. The world does not reward those who simply exist quietly. It respects those who dare to claim their place, not by permission, but by presence. There are moments in life we remember not because they were grand, but because they quietly broke something inside us. You said yes when you wanted to say no. You agreed to carry someone else's burden while your own shoulders were already collapsing. You smiled when you were hurting, and you apologized when you were the one who had been wronged. These small betrayals of yourself do not vanish. They accumulate like stones in the chest. Each one is a reminder that you chose harmony over honesty, survival over self-respect. The dog in you was fed in those moments, wagging its tail, grateful to be accepted. But later, in the silence of your own thoughts, you felt hollow. You wondered why giving so much left you so empty. You began to sense that the love you thought you were earning was not love at all. It was dependence on your obedience. Think of the friendships that only survived because you carried them, the relationships where you had to shrink so the other could shine. How many times did you suppress your truth because you feared being abandoned if you spoke it? How often did you soften your voice, water down your strength, or deny your needs because you believed your worth was conditional? These moments are common, but they carve deep scars, and when you look back, you realize you were not loved for who you were. You were tolerated for what you gave. The dog was rewarded with scraps of affection, but the wolf in you was starved. And the longer you played the dog, the further away you drifted from the life that could have been yours if you had dared to be seen in your full strength. There is a peculiar ache that comes from being celebrated for the mask you wear rather than the face beneath it. People admired your kindness, your patience, your willingness to always say yes. They called you selfless, but deep down you felt unseen. They praised the dog, but they never met the wolf. And when you tried to show a glimpse of your true self, when you said no, when you set a boundary, when you spoke your mind, you saw the shift in their eyes. Suddenly you were no longer their favorite. Suddenly you were changed, difficult, or cold. That pain stings because it confirms what you feared all along. Their affection was never for you, but for the version of you that served them. In that realization, a strange kind of grief takes root. The grief of having betrayed yourself in exchange for counterfeit love. And yet, there are also moments, rare, fleeting, unforgettable, when the wolf breaks free. When you spoke your truth without apology, and though your voice trembled, your soul felt steady. When you refused to be used one more time, even if it meant standing alone. When you stopped asking to be chosen and instead chose yourself. In those moments, you felt something that approval could never give you: freedom. People may not have clapped, they may not have stayed, but the silence that followed carried a strange peace. It was as if your spirit had been waiting for that decision, for that refusal to crawl any longer. And once you felt it, you knew. You could never fully return to the leash again. Transformation often arrives disguised as loss. You lose people you thought would stay forever. You lose the comfort of being liked. You lose the illusion that obedience guarantees love. At first, it feels like death. You mourn the friendships that dissolve, the warmth of approval, the simplicity of being someone else's favorite. But then something unexpected happens. You begin to breathe easier. You realize the space left behind is not empty. It is clean. In that space, the wolf steps forward. You begin to sense that your worth was never meant to be dependent on how softly you barked, but on how fiercely you could stand. The losses, painful as they are, become the cracks through which your true self finally emerges. And with this emergence comes a new vision. You start to notice how many people around you still live as dogs, obedient and desperate for scraps. You see it in their eyes, the fear of speaking, the hunger for validation, the quiet resentment of their own silence. And in that recognition, you feel both sadness and clarity. Sadness because you know they're suffering. Clarity because you know you cannot go back to that life. You cannot unlearn the taste of freedom once the wolf has breathed. You realize that every yes you forced, every smile you faked, every time you swallowed your truth was a lesson leading you here, to this point of awakening. The wolf does not erase the dog, it transforms it. The years you spent obeying were not wasted. They taught you the weight of chains, so you could one day cherish the weightlessness of freedom. They showed you the cost of pleasing others at the expense of yourself, so when you finally choose differently, you understand its value. Every painful experience of self-betrayal becomes fuel for the fire of authenticity, and though the world may never fully applaud the wolf, you no longer need it to. Because the greatest applause you could ever receive is the sound of your own soul, finally unchained, finally unafraid, finally alive. To awaken the wolf inside is not about becoming ruthless, but about remembering what you were before the world trained you to bow. From childhood you were taught to quiet your instincts, to tame your voice, to fit into the mold of politeness and obedience. Over time you learned to exchange your wildness for safety, your truth for approval. Awakening is the process of unlearning those lies, of peeling back the layers of conditioning until you can see yourself clearly again. It feels less like discovering something new and more like returning to something ancient, something you always carried but forgot how to honor. This is why awakening can feel both terrifying and liberating. It demands that you step out of the familiar cages of acceptance and stand in the open space of solitude, where no one applauds you, but no one owns you either. The silence can be deafening at first, but within it, the faint growl of the wolf begins to rise. Scars become part of this awakening. You look back at every betrayal, every moment of humiliation, every instance of being overlooked, and instead of seeing only pain, you begin to see proof. Proof that you endured. Proof that you survived without breaking. The dog in you once looked at scars as shame, as reminders of weakness or failure, but the wolf in you views them differently. Scars are not ugly. They are holy inscriptions, each one carved into your skin as evidence that you walked through fire and came out alive. They are symbols of endurance, markers of your refusal to collapse under the weight of your trials. And as this perspective shifts, you begin to carry yourself differently. You no longer hide your wounds. You let them breathe in the light, because you know now that your scars are not liabilities, they are your crown. Silence becomes a teacher in ways noise never could. When you were the dog, you filled every silence with excuses, with apologies, with desperate attempts to reassure others you are safe and agreeable. But when the wolf awakens, silence no longer feels threatening. It becomes a sanctuary. You sit in it, listen to it, and realize it speaks a language deeper than words. In silence, you notice your own thoughts more clearly. You feel the weight of your presence without needing to broadcast it. And in that realization, you understand a profound truth. Power does not come from shouting. It comes from being unshakably grounded, so that even in silence, your presence is undeniable. The dog sought recognition in noise, but the wolf commands it in stillness. Loneliness is redefined in this awakening. At first it stings. Walking away from false acceptance leaves you feeling isolated, abandoned, vulnerable, but over time the solitude cleanses you. You learn to enjoy your own company, to find nourishment in your own thoughts, to sit with your own spirit without judgment. What once felt like loneliness begins to feel like freedom. You start to notice that being surrounded by people who don't see you is far lonelier than being alone. The wolf is not afraid of solitude because it has discovered that authenticity is worth more than companionship built on lies. The wilderness, once frightening, begins to feel like home. And in this space, your soul learns to breathe without permission. When the wolf awakens, your eyes change. Not literally, but in essence. You begin to see through the layers of performance people wear. You notice the masks, the empty words, the manipulation disguised as love. You notice the way society praises obedience but secretly exploits it. And with this vision, you stop envying those who are loved for their compliance. You realize their affection comes with chains. You would rather walk alone in freedom than be embraced in captivity. This clarity is both a gift and a burden. A gift because you finally see reality as it is. A burden because you can no longer unsee it. But even with the weight of this vision, the wolf stands taller than the dog ever could. Strength, once misunderstood as aggression, reveals itself as quiet resilience. You do not need to fight every battle, nor do you need to prove your power constantly. The wolf does not bark at every passing shadow. It conserves its energy, moves with intention, and only strikes when necessary. This restraint is not weakness, it is mastery. The dog sought validation by always being seen, but the wolf understands that true strength often moves unseen until the moment demands otherwise. Your power is no longer reactive, it is rooted. It flows from an inner well of self-respect that cannot be drained by others' opinions. This shift marks the true awakening. Strength is not about dominating others, but about never again allowing yourself to be dominated. And perhaps the most profound part of awakening is this. You no longer measure your worth by the love or hatred of others. Approval loses its grip. Criticism loses its sting. You stand in the raw truth of yourself and realize that the wolf does not live to please or to provoke. It lives to be, and in that being, there is freedom unlike anything the dog could ever know. You walk differently, breathe differently, exist differently. The chains that once felt like safety now look like death, and the wilderness that once looked like death now feels like life. This is the essence of awakening, the moment you stop fearing your own power and start embracing it, not as a weapon, but as your birthright. The world will always prefer you as a dog, because a dog is predictable, easy to tame, easy to silence. A dog waits for the leash, waits for the hand that feeds, waits for the signal that it is allowed to move. That obedience makes you manageable, and society thrives when individuals remain manageable. Employers want obedient workers, families want obedient children, partners often want obedient lovers. It feels safer for them when you are contained. That is why the moment you begin to change, the moment you start to question, you become dangerous in their eyes. They no longer know how to control you, how to predict you, how to chain you. But here lies the essential truth. You are not born to be domesticated. The wildness in your spirit has always been there, waiting to break through the bars of conditioning. To kill the dog in you is not about cruelty or hatred. It is about liberation. It is about allowing the wolf to step forward, the part of you that walks without permission, that refuses to bow, that carries its dignity like armor and refuses to be traded for approval. Machiavelli's whisper echoes through history. The world bows not to those who are simply good, but to those who are strong enough to be heard. This does not mean you abandon morality or compassion. It means you stop mistaking obedience for virtue. The wolf does not become heartless simply because it refuses to kneel. On the contrary, the wolf understands balance. It knows when to fight and when to walk away. It knows when to guard and when to retreat. The dog lives in desperation for acceptance, but the wolf lives in clarity, guided by its own inner compass. In awakening this truth, you begin to realize that your life is not meant to be a performance. It is not meant to be lived waiting for applause. It is meant to be lived in truth, even if that truth is uncomfortable for others, even if it means some doors close, even if it means some people walk away. For the first time, you stop betraying yourself for the comfort of others, and that shift alone is revolutionary. The real revolution has never been about overthrowing governments or demanding the world change in your favor. Revolutions of that kind may shake the earth, but they fade with time, replaced by new systems and new chains. The true revolution, the one no tyrant can touch, is the revolution of the self. It is the quiet but unshakable decision to no longer crawl when you can stand, to no longer beg when you can claim, to no longer dilute your voice when it was meant to echo. This revolution is not broadcast with fireworks, but it transforms everything. When one individual awakens, it shifts the balance of every room they enter. When one soul refuses to bend, it forces others to confront their own chains. You do not need to change the world to live free. You only need to change yourself. And when you do, the world begins to respond to you differently, not because it has changed, but because you have. This transformation is not loud, but it is undeniable. You may not post it online or announce it to anyone, yet people begin to feel it in your presence. They notice that your eyes no longer seek permission. They sense that your voice carries a weight it never had before. They cannot manipulate you the way they once did, and it unsettles them. Some will distance themselves from you, not because you harmed them, but because your independence makes them face their own weakness. Others will be drawn to you, inspired by the strength they secretly long for. But regardless of who stays or leaves, you walk your path with a new kind of peace. You understand now that validation is not the prize, authenticity is. Respect is not earned by crawling, it is earned by standing. And even if the world never applauds you, you no longer need it to. The wolf's silence speaks louder than the dog's bark ever could. It is tempting to think that this path will make you lonely, but in truth it gives you the purest kind of companionship, the companionship of your own soul. When you were a dog surrounded by people who liked your obedience, you still felt alone because they did not know the real you. Now, when you stand as the wolf, even if fewer people walk beside you, you feel whole, because at last you are no longer a stranger to yourself. Solitude becomes strength rather than punishment. You begin to love your own company, to trust your own instincts, to value your own voice. This inner revolution gives you something no amount of external validation ever could, the knowledge that your worth is unshakable. No rejection can take it away, no betrayal can diminish it, no silence can erase it. For once, you belong not to the world, not to the leash, not to the hand that feeds, but to yourself. And so, the call is not to rise with anger or vengeance, but with stillness and clarity. The call is not to become ruthless, but to become whole. The dog in you will always crave applause, but you must let it die if you are ever to live as the wolf. The wolf carries silence like a crown, walks through solitude with dignity, and claims freedom not through violence, but through self-possession. This is the revolution that matters, the one that happens in the quiet corners of your heart, the one that no one else may see but everyone will eventually feel. And in the end, when you walk into the world unchained, there will be no need for grand declarations. Your very presence will speak. You have killed the dog in you, and in its place the wolf now stands.